Hi, my name is Cece Doucette, and I am the Director of Massachusetts for Safe Technology and the Education Services Director for the international nonprofit Wireless Education. And we're delighted to have you here with us today at WCCA TV in Worcester, Massachusetts, where we are going to further the conversation on technology safety and the risks that today's wireless technology brings to us and our communities. With us today, I am delighted to have Rob and Dana Strayton, who have had some experience out on Chappaquiddick with regard to a cell tower that was erected next to their home. So welcome, Rob and Dana.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Cece.
Cece.
So tell us how you first came to learn about radio frequency radiation and the biological effects.
So in was it
2015.
2015, an application came forward to erect a 140-foot cell tower in the front yard of my neighbor's home, about 300 feet from my home on Chappaquiddick. And so really, as a result of that, I really started to investigate the health effects of that. But that being said, prior to that, I had actually had a 30-year career in the telecommunications industry. I was a consultant to a variety of telecom companies. Most of them were developing software and hardware for wired networks, but there was some wireless in those days. So it was really through that I learned.
Okay, and Dana, I understand that you come from a long line of family in the North End of Boston in the restaurant industry.
I do.
And I went down to the North End with a resident there, and we did a walkthrough with the radio frequency detection meter, and we saw these beautiful, ornate-looking street lamps that we soon discovered are actually small cell towers right at the curb. And as we know, above the restaurants and the bakeries, there are families who live up there. So you walk down Hanover Street and you see these beautiful, what look like street lamps, but it's a cell tower. And then you get to the crossroads and you look down there and they put up these ugly gray monopoles right in front of people's homes. So I've met with the North End Residents Association and begun the conversation there as well. But this is just to illustrate, from an island on the outskirts of Massachusetts to downtown Boston, we are all facing this intrusion of these close-range microwave radiation antennas.
Correct.
And when the World Health Organization classified this as a Group 2B, possibly human carcinogen, back in 2011, they indicated it doesn't matter what the source is, whether it's a big macro cell antenna, whether it's a small cell antenna like they're putting up for 5G, or whether it's our personal devices. Every form of radio frequency man-made microwave radiation is potentially carcinogenic. And so as we know through the science, it's come much more clear. The WHO has reopened their investigation. They are now looking at not only cancers, but DNA damage. Infertility is a big one, the impact on children, and the impact on our environment, because every biological cell on the planet is vulnerable to microwave radiation. So
Absolutely, Stacey.
So our message is not no technology, it's safe technology. And when Rob said that when he worked in the industry, most of what he did was with hardwired technology.
Right.
That's the best solution.
Absolutely the best solution. And I believe that we always wanted to live on Chappaquiddick, but we also wanted to live in an environment that was without a lot of connection. Mm-hmm. And we chose to be on an island, off an island, to basically unplug.
Yeah.
And then we found in this environment that has, I don't know how many bird species, how much protected shoreline. I mean, you can basically go through all of the various environmental
factors. Yeah, I mean, there's a number of endangered species. There's all sorts of protected habitats. The island is 40% conservation land. There's a number of protected habitats, a number of protected and endangered species.
Yes.
Right.
And
And then for them to come and to put an application forward, I think that's my point.
Right.
To put a cell phone tower, a 140-foot tower, basically on a dirt road, 30 feet off of the road
in the guy's front yard.
in his front yard, and give it a variance, which wasn't even allowed
No.
Through your zoning code.
through
it
our
said
zoning
no.
codes, and to allow this to occur in a place that we never thought it would occur. And I think that has to be an eye-opener for everybody, that they're coming and they're trying to put it wherever they can.
Right. So for those who are especially concerned about the environment, the Environmental Health Trust and others are doing a free public education webinar with a whole series of experts at 1 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, May 4th.
That's great.
This may air beyond that date, so if you were to go to the Environmental Health Trust, people can go and listen to world-leading experts in what microwave radiation does to the environment, let alone to us. So I understand that I know Rob and maybe Dana have had some biological impact when that cell tower went live. Can you share
Very
that
much
with
so.
us?
Yeah, it was a very lengthy sort of hearing process. I think it was very stressful. As a result of that, I actually had a heart attack in 2018, and I was fortunate. I got great care and was in pretty good shape. But in 2020, they installed 5G on that tower. So at no time, even when I was having a heart attack, did I ever have an irregular heartbeat. My heartbeat was regular. It wasn't pumping blood through my entire heart, but it was regular. And literally the day that they installed 5G on this tower that they built, I had supraventricular tachycardia. Essentially, my heart rate went through the roof. My heart rate went from, now I'm laying still in bed, went from 140 to 160 to 180 to 185. When the paramedics arrived, it was about 180. By the time they put me in the ambulance, 3 minutes later, my heart rate was 225 beats per minute, almost 4 beats per second.
And this was the day the 5G antenna went live.
Correct.
Literally. Now, you have to understand, they put the antennas up and they turn them on. They don't. It's not, the guys are up there working, they're on. They turn them right on. It's a misnomer that they turn those antennas off when the guys are working. They don't.
Wow. So, did you know it was from the antennas as it was happening? Had you already made the connection that that cell tower was biologically active?
Yes. Well, I mean, we knew the tower was live. They had already installed 3 and 4G on the tower. And then, again, it's just a few hundred feet from my house. And so I saw that they were working on it, and actually walked down there and determined that they were in fact installing 5G on the tower. So it was literally the same day.
So when the emergency responders came to help you, did they understand what you were trying to tell them was happening?
No, I don't. I think that sadly, there are a lot of people who are very misinformed, and there are a lot of people, obviously wireless technology has some real benefits, but too many people, they just simply don't understand the risks associated with it.
Right, and I've heard some awful experiences from people with electromagnetic sensitivities. There's one woman who lives in the flight path to Logan Airport. There's also a school right across the street. So she feels the planes before most people could hear them coming. And she bolts down to her basement where she's created a Faraday cage-like environment. And she has to do this all day long. And then when the parents queue up to pick up their children, they're all waiting in line on their devices, and she feels that too. So she got really sick one day, and the emergency responders came, and rather than listening to her when she says, I have a medical diagnosis of electromagnetic sensitivity, I need to get to the hospital and get some help, they'd never heard of it. So they Section 8 her into the psych ward.
Oh my gosh.
Where she did not get the help that she needed. And she wound up fighting that and got the crazy expunged from her record, because she was not crazy. She was experiencing a reaction to her toxic environment.
And we both do. We both have extreme
Right. So I
sensitivity.
want to let all of our viewers know that since then, we have been so fortunate to the great works of Dr. Lynn Patrick and Elizabeth Kelly to have medical training available today.
Yes. It's fantastic.
If folks will go out to Massachusetts for Safe Technology, that's MA, the number 4, safetech.org, and go to our resources page, we have a letter you can print out and give right to your own healthcare practitioners to say, please go get trained to recognize, diagnose, treat, and prevent these microwave sicknesses. And right below that letter, in 2004, the International Association of Firefighters recognized that their front line was getting sick from the cell towers that were being mounted near or on their stations. And so Dr. Gunnar Hauser, who is actually one of the presenters in the EMF Medical Conference, he scanned their brains with functional MRIs, and it showed that that cell tower had changed the gray matter of their brain. And when they were going to respond to an emergency in Santa Barbara, California, they couldn't remember how to suit up properly. They got on their engines and went out and couldn't remember where to go in this community that they had serviced for years. And when they got there, they couldn't remember how to properly administer emergency services. So the IAFF looked at the science and they said, until the science proves that this man-made radiation is safe, we do not consent to having these frequencies anywhere near where we live and work and sleep. And so there is that IAFF statement that people can print out. I actually brought that letter for the medical conference plus the firefighter letter to my fire station. And they were so glad to know about this. And they were especially glad because they need continuing education credits too. And because we had to pivot during the pandemic and make it an online medical conference, that online training has been reaccredited and it's available for those who enroll by June 15th and complete the training by July 1st. So 24.5 professional continuing
That's
education
great.
credits. But I don't know of another conference coming up. I haven't heard of anybody taking the year or two to plan it that we need. So I really encourage all of our listeners, even if you're not fully up to speed on what this issue is, take advantage of this opportunity to get your healthcare team and your first responders trained on this, because with this ubiquitous radiation and these cell towers and 5G small cells coming in at closer and closer range, as they said at the medical conference, we can well expect to have many, many more people getting sick from microwave radiation, and they're going to get misdiagnosed if your healthcare practitioners haven't been trained. I did want to give a word of encouragement, though, that after that conference expires, there are some excellent resources. Okay. Dr. Panagopoulos out of Greece has collaborated with many of the world-leading scientists and doctors, and they have now published the first medical school textbook on electromagnetic fields of wireless communication, biological and health effects. And I understand that Dr. Magda Havis, who is the co-chair of the medical conference, is also pulling together some resources that might be able to help train once this conference expires. So there's always hope, there's always a good next step. But if citizens don't start using their voices, we're not going to get out from under this before the harm gets so egregious. So if you could walk us through, after you went away in the ambulance, we've got about 14 minutes. Teach us how you opened this conversation. And I'll just paraphrase to say that in an earlier segment, the first 3 segments we did of Tech Safe, I just walked through the science, the risks, and what people can do to have safe technology. So those 3 episodes are out there for our viewers to just learn along with us. But Martin Luther King Jr. taught us when important changes finally happen in society, it comes through 3 channels. 1, the public becomes informed and engages, which is what we're hoping to inspire today.
Absolutely.
2, it goes through the courts. And 3, public policy ultimately catches up. And we can talk a little bit later about bills that we have here in Massachusetts, but I understand, most of us think we'll just raise our hands and say, hey, there's a problem here, and that those above us would fix it, our town boards, our state legislators. And I think, like you and I, we have found that it really has to start with the grassroots.
Yeah, we had an interesting experience. Our public hearing process was very lengthy. We have a couple of different, zoning types of boards that it had to go through. And I think what you learn, I think we've learned a lot in the process. And I think the thing that we learned is that you really need to be proactive today. And there are a couple of really important factors. One, you have to understand the zoning laws in your town.
How do we do that?
So that they should be readily available on the town website. There should be, a book of all of the, a little booklet with all of the town's bylaws in there. Specifically, typically the towns will have something called a personal wireless services facility bylaw. That's sort of industry speak for a cell tower. It sounds a little less harmful when it's a personal wireless services facility than, 200,000 watts of radiation being beamed into your house. So I think that's where you start. And then the interesting thing in Massachusetts is that we, particularly in our towns, it's really very simple to really make changes to those bylaws. And it's all you need is to create a petition. You get 10 registered voters of the town to sign that petition. And you can put a warrant item onto the town meeting warrant, and the town is able to vote on that. Very often, it also has to go onto the ballot itself and be voted on, along with all of the other candidates and the rest of the election in town. But it's a relatively straightforward process. The hard part is to build that grassroots effort to support it, and that's really the important part and the hard part. And you have a lot of resources on your website.
Yeah, we have resources today like we didn't have when I fell down the rabbit hole 9 years ago.
And we're going back 7 years, so we've learned we've had a very long journey, and I think we have a tremendous amount of information to be able to help people, and we're happy to help whoever we can.
So for folks listening with us today, if you go out to Massachusetts for Safe Technology and you go to our Take Action page, you will find a toolkit that has been put together by Americans for Responsible Technology. And they have letters to the editor, they have sample zoning code, they have a checklist to start with your own zoning code and say, gee, here's what they say we ought to have. How's it look in our zoning bylaws? And help to fill that gap.
Fantastic.
So we're so very grateful for all the towns around the country who have already gotten a head start on most of us, because there are wonderful examples of real zoning code that have been enacted into law. The crux of it, though, is that the industry has come into our towns and said, gosh, back in 1996, this Telecommunications Act was passed, which they pretty much wrote. And it says, wow, if there's anybody who's concerned about environmental harm, shoot, you're just out of luck because, look, the law itself says you can't sue us. So that's pretty much all our towns know. So the industry will say, you have to let us put this cell tower, and here's where we want to put it. And they always want to put it in the path of least resistance, where there's already electricity easy to hook up to, where they don't have to clear the land or take it to a mountaintop where it would be more safely sited, but where they can put it in quick and make their money the fastest.
Correct.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly what you see. But that really is a bit of a misnomer. The industry bullies the towns, and they threaten the towns. The towns do have the authority to deny an application for a cell tower. And one of the most important parts, whenever an application comes forward for any type of cellular infrastructure, there's always a section on alternative sites. Now, that is one area where the towns, can deny an application because the way that law, the Telecommunications Act is written is that if there are alternative sites available, and there's always alternative sites available, that the town can deny the application. They don't have to approve another site. They don't have to suggest another site. They simply have to look at the alternative site analysis and say, well, there are alternatives to this location at the elementary school, or and that's where you see a lot of these. There are alternative sites, and so we're going to deny this application on that basis. And the towns are empowered to do that. The Telecommunications Act absolutely empowers local control.
Do you have to have that in your zoning code to say that?
No, you don't actually. That is part of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. So that's federal law that covers the entire country.
Right. So I think another distinction that isn't always clear to our towns or our citizens is that the industry comes in and says, oh, your citizens, they want 5G. Well, I don't think you and I ever woke up and said, I need to download something in 2 seconds. They're just getting their marketing out ahead. And then they come in and say, well, that's going to require a lot more capacity on these cell towers, so we're going to need to put more cell towers in. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, what the Telecom Act says is that within reason, you need to be able to make a phone call outside to call for an emergency assist. But what the industry is doing is selling all these additional services that require additional cell towers.
Correct.
And that's not what our towns are obliged to do. So if you want to protect your town, all you have to do is make sure that you can get a phone call within reason. And I understand that the carriers in an emergency call will switch to one another's antennas. If they don't have an antenna nearby, an emergency call will automatically switch over to those infrastructure components. And so if you go out and you look at a carrier like Verizon or AT&T or whomever, and you look at their coverage maps, they're boasting that they have coverage just about everywhere. So if they have coverage to make a cell phone call, then we don't, as a community, have to say, yes, we're going to let you put cell towers in our residential areas. But I think for some of those finer points, you have to get it codified in your zoning bylaw.
Right.
And there was a wonderful forum that was recently done by Americans for Responsible Technology, and folks can go out to their website, and it was with leading attorneys across the country. And as Scott McAuliffe tells us, he's the attorney who gave oral arguments when the FCC was sued for ignoring 11,000 pages of scientific evidence of harm. And Scott, in this recent forum, said, the industry comes in and tells your town their hands are tied. Or like you said, they'll threaten to sue if you don't approve this. So Mr. McAuliffe said, granted, you may have one finger tied, but Congress left you 9 other fingers to protect your local control.
Absolutely.
So, but our towns have only been given this disinformation from industry. So we're so grateful that now our towns have these incredible videos to watch, these incredible toolkit resources, and sample code and checklists. But again, like you said, it takes the citizens, and not just one, because one voice is very easily swept under the carpet. So get others around you educated first, and then go to your town.
Yeah, I think the important thing for people to understand is that these the applications are coming forward. As you had mentioned in the North End with the small cells, I notice every single cellular infrastructure anywhere. I mean, a small cell, I see them, and I notice them, and I see them, and they're coming. They want these in the worst way. And the important thing to understand about 5G is that 5G is not a voice service; it's a data service, and it
and the
really,
law only applies to voice.
Correct.
Voice and email and text actually as well. But none of those are such high bandwidth applications. So the real reason for 5G is an economic reason, and it's all about the carriers generating revenue. If you look at your calling plans today, you get unlimited voice, unlimited text. They don't make, they just get their standard subscription fee. What they need to do is they need to sell those add-on services, videos, music streaming, movie streaming. I mean, why would AT&T buy the largest movie library on earth unless they had trying to monetize that?
They're buying up the entertainment industry as their next revenue stream.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's what 5G is really about. It's really designed specifically, the reason that exists is to compete with the wireline companies. So, Comcast and all of the cable companies, they want to compete with them it's much cheaper to put up a small cell than it is to run a fiber optic cable.
Right.
So it's, and quite frankly, we've been paying these universal access fees. If you look at any one of your phone bills, wireline or wireless phone bill, there's a charge, universal access fee, and that is specifically designed, that is money earmarked to build out wired networks.
So we have been paying on our bills all along to bring fiber optics to
the door,
the premises. And then once you have it hooked up to your premises, you just go to the back of your router and you simply hook up with an Ethernet cable and a little $20, $30 adapter you can buy to plug in each one of your devices. If you have a bunch of devices, just get an Ethernet switch. It's like an extension cord for electronics. And once you plug everything in, you just go into the settings and turn off the antennas.
Correct.
So then you have a much faster signal,
Yes,
far
you do.
more reliable. Your
Yes, you
data's
do.
not flying through the air to be hacked, so privacy is better.
Correct.
And wireless consumes 10 times more energy.
Correct.
Right? So we've been sold all Wi-Fi all the time, but it's a raw deal for our families, it's a raw deal for our health, and it's a raw deal for our towns.
Okay.
So if you guys can stay a little bit longer today, I would like to ask our producer if we might tape a second episode to talk about the legal pathways that you guys have been pursuing.
Yeah.
Adam, would that be all right if we do a second episode today? So also in the second episode, I will give an introduction to the bills that we have in Massachusetts this session. We just got word yesterday that the first one is coming up for public hearing next Thursday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the 4th of May. So anybody's welcome to go out to my website, click join the effort, and you'll get on my list. And then I can send you notices where you could send in a statement of support, because if we don't use our voices, there's no knight in shining armor coming to protect us.
Correct.
It's up to you and I to empower our public servants to be enough of a very diplomatic voice, be the kind of person they'd want to work with. Don't go in there with both guns blazing, because nobody wants to play in the sandbox with that.
Right.
So we are here in Worcester, Massachusetts, and we're so grateful to WCCA TV for giving us this opportunity to bring forward this very critical conversation today that we simply will not hear about in mainstream media, because if you watch an hour of prime time, count how many ads you see from the wireless and the telecom and the cable industries, and that will give you a pretty clear picture of who is controlling the content of the messaging that we hear today. But if you go to Massachusetts for Safe Technology, MA4, safetech.org, you can go right to the resources page and look at all the science. And you can also go to the state efforts page to see all of our agencies and legislators who are actively engaging in this conversation today. So thank you to Dana and Rob Strayton for joining us for this episode, and we look forward to sharing more of their experience on Chappaquiddick in the next episode.
Thanks, Cece. It was our
Thank you,
pleasure.
Cece.
Have a tech safe day.